Oh, it's recording. Yeah. Hello. Hello, hello. Right. Wait another minute or two. Yeah, looks like it's about time. Um, Moodle. Alrighty. So, yeah, I was going to address that once we got going in class. But yeah. Oh, my bot's not in here. One moment. Yeah, the channel name change threw off the streaming software earlier. Oh, it's looking at the old one. Cloudbot, wake up, please. Cloudbot. Come on. Quick, post memes. Oh, you're not waking up, are you, Cloudbot? Even though you know the name of the channel. Oh well. I'll have to fix that another day. Um, yeah. I already modded Streamlabs. Oh well. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. But save that for another day. Um, yeah. Now you won't be. Now you're not gonna get things that are non-sexual in nature flagged for sexual. So let's get started. So I just wanted to make sure, again, everybody that's here, hello, that you're all here, that we are all aware of the schedule. So again, today we're going to do half the class on, we'll talk about Active Directory containers a little bit since we kind of glossed over them. I'm just going to show a little bit more detail on these. And then the other half of the class, again, would be term project work time. I'm not going to have any deliverables for this, more so just make sure that you are wrapping things up, basically. So we have that for today, which also means that today is going to be my last presentation to you guys. So should be fun. I'm hoping that everybody graduates and everything and all that fun stuff. So Thursday we will do a optional in-class lab. So I will send out some more information on this guy probably tomorrow. This is something that I tend to do every year in this class, so we're going to keep up that tradition. I am not going to be live streaming it. I'll be on the Discord, but basically we're going to talk about multi-user server concerns. And if you had me for web development, you know what this is already. Yeah, you got a question. If it's optional, will it be extra credit? There are no deliverables. It is not something that will be done for credit. It's more of a fun activity than a work assignment. So it's nothing to be concerned about. If you don't want to participate, there is nothing wrong with that. I am being intentionally vague. Um, but it's not, it's going to be more, let's talk about something and then we're going to do some things. And then after that, we will have our group presentations, basically. So for practice experience, yeah, you could say that, basically. Um, it should be enjoyable, I hope at least. So, and then next week will be your group presentations. So I've had a couple questions on these already. Presentations should be about the same, 5 to 10 minutes should be adequate. Um, yeah, basically same format as last semester. I want to know who is on your team. I want to do I think I've got hopefully I've got the project stuff up there for what I'm looking for that. Basically, who's on your team, who did what did you guys do? Um, just looking at the presentation guidelines, which should hopefully be in here somewhere. Yeah, all right. Introduce your team, introduce your project, do a little demo, and then Q&A. So the Q&A will be interesting. Basically, what we will do is I will um, you can type the questions via text in Twitch, or we can chat in Discord, whichever is going to be easiest. But if anybody has any questions, we'll watch the video and then, ask questions in a chat, and if I'll relay them over the stream, basically. So, yep, that is coming up next week, and yeah, I think that's about it. So the other thing then, I've gotten a few questions about the website. So the requirement is that it be database driven. And again, the intention for that is to make it a little bit more not complicated for complication's sake, but just you have more features and functionalities for it. Last semester, I didn't care if you did a text file as a website, basically, as long as you had the content. Here, I want it to be database driven, and all that means is that you have a database serving some kind of content. I don't care what the content is. I just want there to be a database serving content to your website. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is just to install WordPress. Okay, that is a database-driven website. You can put your term project page in WordPress, for instance, as a WordPress website, or install Drupal, or install, there are those forums that we installed for the lab. As long as you have something being provided by a database, that's all I care about. It doesn't have to be something that you manually coded with PHP, you hooked it up to MySQL. However, if you did that, that's great, but you don't have to. You can just install some kind of a web technology. So does that answer the web question? It wasn't intended to be a huge burden, especially given that WordPress is so easy to install. Um, just wanted to give you more exposure to that side of things. Okie dokie. Ooh, there's a new version of Slack out. How cool. All right, good, good, good. Then we can get into the content. All right, so this is going to be slightly interesting in that um, I've got a demo towards the end and it's not going to work, and I don't know why. So if anybody knows why, I would be more than happy to solicit suggestions. Um, but speaking of the final exam review projects. Oh, is a question about the final exam review? How exactly does the cheat sheet work? That's a good question. Obviously, you are all remote. Even if I did something as dumb, yeah, well, let me rephrase dumb because I'm sure people will be doing this. Um, if I made you sit in front of a camera and show me your cheat sheet or whatever, you could still have one over here. So, I mean, I'm not going to worry about it. Make your cheat sheet however you want to make it. I'm not going to ask you to turn it in. Just whatever you think will be helpful for the final exam. And we will talk about the final exam next week as well, because obviously there's going to be a lot of uncertainty with that. Um, how it's going to be structured is we will have a Moodle quiz. Um, we probably will have a review session. I've got to figure that out. Maybe what I'll do is we can do like a special Q&A time or something like that. But basically, I've got the topics up online. They've been up there for, I think, since April 1st for some reason. Yeah, the chatbot's broken, so the redeem's not going to work. But basically, whatever you feel like you're going to be able to need from this sheet. What's with the final grade? Okay, let me answer these in order. Questions are coming in hot. So final exam will be on the final exam day. It'll be during the final exam time. So it'll be basically like a timed thing. I haven't figured out what the times are going to look like and all that, but it will be flexible, so you don't have to freak out like if your internet goes out for an hour or something like that. So cheat sheets are fine. I'm not going to collect them. We will do a final exam review some point next week, depending on how the presentations go. Then the satisfactory, unsatisfactory question. This is a better one to ask your academic advisor about than me, because I don't know how it's going to shake out for you. Um, Basically, the way that works is that you can have, you can do the class as normal, get your grade, whatever it's going to end up being. And then if you don't like your grade, you can have it be made into satisfactory slash unsatisfactory. So basically, you would get an S or a U for the semester, and that would not count against your grade point. So, for instance, if I doubt this will happen to anybody based on how the grades have been looking, but if you failed, for instance, you'd probably get unsatisfactory. Or if you have like a 3.0, you'd get whatever the grade equivalent of that is. Maybe you wanted a 3.5, you say, hey, I want a satisfactory. You still pass the class, but it doesn't like hurt your GPA. Yeah, I don't know what the rules are, to be quite honest, for that. So if anything below a C is unsatisfactory, then that's how it is. Whatever the school rules are going to be end up being for that. But basically, it just doesn't hurt your GPA. Now, I don't know what that's going to look like in the future for you. That's the only thing. So, like, if you take a satisfactory, and you're trying to get into grad school or medical school, or you need a very like I don't know what it's going to look like or how people will interpret it. So that's why I said you might be better off asking an academic advisor about that kind of thing. Um, but basically, you can get your grade and then you can convert it. I think it's 14 days after the end of the semester or something like that. So it's mainly up to you if you feel like you want something to not hurt your GPA, basically. But then you have an S on your transcript, which you'd have to explain. You just say, well, it's, corona related. I took an S rather than and that. So, but I don't know how other people will view it. That's the only thing. I would say probably 95. Well, the majority of you in here are probably not going into med school, so it's probably not as big of a concern. Um, I think I have had one person go into med school for some reason, but yeah. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Okay, so there's the officer registrar made a page. That makes sense that they did that. That's good. Okie dokie. Yeah, we should schedule a final exam review. I'll try to do that. And if we do a final exam review, well, when we do a review, what I will probably do is we'll do a session next week. I'll probably do it through Twitch, kind of like class, and then I'll just make the video available for you all afterwards. And then thanks, Triash. He put the link in the chat for Twitch for that registrar page. Cool. All right. So containers today then. I'm trying to. All right, we're gonna get into this so that you guys have time to do your term project work afterwards, because again, course is mainly project based. So we talked about containers in terms of like Docker containers. We talked about containers in terms of logical containers and Active Directory. What we're talking about today is the Active Directory notion of a container. And basically what that means is this, how do we organize our infrastructure? So this is not like about Docker today. This is not Kubernetes. This is pure Active Directory today. And you can have containers in LDAP too. You can have, basically folders or tree units or something like that. But here we're focusing on the Microsoft side of things. So what do we care about in terms of containers for Active Directory? A container can be organizational units. They can have computers, users, groups can be containers. Basically, anything that can be used to organize another object is a type of container. All right. So if we look at, I've got my remote desktop somewhere. Here we go. So here we have our domain for our 3670. Our domain here. Here we have a domain. Domain's technically a container. It's containing everything else. It contains our policy. It contains all of our organizational units. In here, we can also have groups, for instance. So if I were to go ahead and, I'm in group policy, not Active Directory. Like we could add a container for everything, basically, right? So AD users and computers. So this is the school virtual machine I got back into mine. If you have been struggling to log into vCenter, it's your username at SECS instead of just your username. They changed the login scheme. But for instance, if I wanted to add a new group, for instance, this would be a container for whoever I want to assign to this group, whether it's computer, whether it's a user, whether it's another group. And we'll talk about groups in a little bit too, kind of half the reason why we're talking about this. So we're just organizing our infrastructure, okay? And why do we use an OU or something like this? Mainly, we're going to use it for, again, organization. We can use it for applying group policy, which you all did in the lab. You should have, if I recall, you created an organizational unit, you applied a group policy to it. Or if you just use the default group policy, you're applying it to the whole infrastructure, right? The whole domain. We can also use it for delegation, which we'll look at momentarily too, where delegation is basically giving other users rights to do something. Like I'm going to delegate adding users and changing passwords to you, for instance. So organizational units we kind of already know about, but we're going to look at some of the other things too. So groups are another collection here, basically. So this is another container for something. Now, in a group, we're going to stick, we'll put users, so we can put their computers, their tablets, their phones, basically whatever devices we're tracking in Active Directory. Now, this is not, in the strictest sense, a container, though it's basically, in all intents and purposes, a container of some means. For instance, a container, you could apply a group policy object to a group. You cannot. We talked about this before. But you can come at it from the flip side where we have a group, we can force them to work inside of a group policy object. So basically we would have kind of an end around notion of I'm going to create a group of specific users. I can't just apply a GPO to that group, but I can make the group consume that GPO, basically. Now, again, a little backwards if we're a little hazy on groups. But for groups, what we can get are things like permissions. So think back to our Linux days where we were assigning group level permissions to objects or group ownership. The same notion applies here. All right. We can also do delegation for user rights in here. Basically, we're going to delegate, you have the rights to do this or this or this, and we can make that a group-based activity. In terms of where this would make sense, initially I thought that we would actually have everybody be a group. So team A would be a group, team B would be another group, and then we would kind of assign permissions based on that notion. But it ended up being easier to have an organizational unit as a team-based group, right? Because then we can also apply things like group policy to them. And life's a little bit easier. But groups are something that you can use as well. And what you might find with groups too, I'm going to pop back over here. Let's minimize this. Let's say that we want to do something like create a file share. All right, so I've got I would create a distribution point. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but I've got effectively a shared network drive with a couple of MSI installers. In here, you go back up a level, properties, sharing. We can assign groups permissions to manage this folder, right? So here I've got the system group or the system user, for instance. I could also put groups in here as well. So for instance, domain admins, that's a group, all right? So there, I would basically have everybody with this group could have full control over this folder, right? So this is the notion of a permission being applied to a folder. Now this is a shared drive, so basically if you're a domain admin, you have full control, whereas everyone only has read access. So if you are not a domain admin, or you are not the system user, which is basically the kind of hidden account that will be used for remote installs, for instance, you only have read access, right? So we basically would have, something like that. That'd be one example of where a group would be useful. I could put all of you in the users group, for instance, and then you would all have access to the 3670 file share. For instance, everybody else would not. You could also just apply a group policy object and apply that to an organizational unit. I mean, there's lots of ways to do the same thing here. But groups would be one way, and it's one that we haven't really talked about yet. Okay, so we also have some default groups too with Active Directory. You can define custom groups. You can create a group in Active Directory and do all of that fun stuff. But we also have these built-in ones, and domain admins is one that I just showed you. We also have enterprise admins, schema admins. Basically, each of these groups of users has a default set of permissions with what they can do. For instance, if you're an enterprise admin, like I've got right here, you can do anything within the scope of the Active Directory domain, or the forest, sorry. So I am an enterprise admin. I have kind of carte blanche to do whatever I want, right? You could be a schema admin, where you have the ability to update the schema of your Active Directory infrastructure. You'd be limited for other permissions, but you would have this basically power over the network. And that'd be somebody who would be in charge of laying out your Active Directory environment, right? So all of these groups, and there's going to be a lot of particulars with what each group can and cannot do. But typically, you would assign users to these groups who you would want to work in this space, right? You wouldn't assign everybody to be a domain admin. You would not assign everybody to be an enterprise admin, because that's a very easy way to completely bork your whole infrastructure, right? If you hire an intern, you give them enterprise admin status and they have no idea what they're doing. It's very easy that they could destroy your network just by accident, by playing around and trying to do what they think is right. Or you could be giving people not enough permissions, right? I have to add a new user to my Active Directory infrastructure, but I don't have the privileges to do that. I might be in the wrong group. So again, it's going to be that that whole principle of least privilege thing. And again, you can define custom groups too. So I showed that very briefly over here. Where'd my AD go? So I could do new group. We also see some of these other units here. OU, new computer, a new person. We could define a group, and the group could be supergroup. Then we have some options here that we'll talk about as well in a moment. Basically, what's the scope of the group? So what levels of access does the group have? What's the type of group? Right? Is it going to be policy driven? Or is it going to be email driven? So we'll get into that here in a minute. Actually, we'll get into it right now. That was farther down. So for instance, here I'm creating a group called Four Eyes. So this was actually a team from about 3 or 4 years ago. Might have been 3 years ago. Everybody on the team had glasses, so they picked the name Four Eyes, and they thought it was hilarious. But basically here I'd be creating a group for this team. Again, we have some various options here. So a domain local group only has permissions within a particular domain. So here I've got CIT349.local. This group would only have permissions within that domain. I could create a subdomain for this team, for instance, foureyes.cit349.local. In their group scope, if it was domain local in there, would only have access inside of that subdomain. Right, so permissions can be limited on a domain by domain basis here. You could also make it global, which gives you permissions to any domain, or universal, which is even larger. All right, so global scope here, again, that's this middle option. You have a forest-wide scope. So basically any domain within your whole forest of your Active Directory setup, right? So I have access to any resource. So that includes computers, users, group policies, all of that kind of infrastructure that goes with it. Now, global groups can participate in the scope. User accounts can participate in the scope. Basically, you're creating a global AD-wide group or forest-wide group. Now, why would you want to create something like this? One example would be, let's say that I create a user group where I'm going to put employees inside of it. Right, so maybe these employees have a very similar job description, like project engineer or human resources representative or IT admin. Okay, I might have a few IT people spread across my whole Active Directory infrastructure. We might create a group for them. Or it could be department level. So engineering might be in a group. Now they might be a global group in that they have access to all of the resources they need, AD-wide, whether it's a file share or another device or something like that. And then the other one is universal. Basically, this contains also any member from any domain in the forest. So basically, we're still forest-wide, but we're looking to access even more. All right, so these tend to be more used if you're going to be nesting groups. So if I've got, like a very high level global group and I'm drawing down and drawing down, so I might make something universal if I want them to all have access to basically all of our resources. So those are the three types. Basically, what we're looking at here is just who has access to which resource. Okay. So the other option, so this was on the right side, was this group type, whether it's a security group or a distribution group. Now, this is kind of an interesting option here. Basically, security groups, you're assigning permissions. So I'm going to assign that read, write, execute permission to a group for a particular resource. A distribution group is basically an email list. So if I create a employees group, for instance, and I make it a distribution list, I can send a message to all of those people, basically like kind of a bulk email type of thing. If it's a distribution list, you're not assigning permissions. So if I created the employees group, I can't say you all have access to the shared drive. I would need a security group for that. So kind of just a slight distinction of the purpose of the group. All right, so if that all makes sense, we have kind of a little summary here. So what's a domain versus a group versus an OU, kind of in a nice little summary package. A domain is going to be a security boundary, right? If we remember from way back when, the domain was kind of putting up a wall around a set of resources. And a forest would put up that trust boundary, if we remember from way back when. A group, these are going to be users and devices mainly. And an OU is going to be a way to organize other objects. Okay, so we have these three type of high-level containers, in a way. So why do we use an OU? We like OUs because we can very easily apply group policy objects. All right, so we can very easily assign, a new GPO and then put it right in, basically. We can also delegate tasks, and I'll show you this in a moment. Where, for instance, I create an OU and I want to, again, delegate user management to somebody else. Or if you have a help desk, you can have them be in charge of resetting accounts, right? I forgot my password. I mistyped it 20 times and it got locked. I haven't changed my password in 10 years. Now you're going to get auto-locked. Basically, let other people handle some of these tasks that are out there. This is what delegation gets us. It's a little bit trickier to apply to a group, so OUs, this is possible. So here's actually a wizard for delegating control. Basically, you have a bunch of common options that you can get, or you can create a custom task in here. But for instance, the first option is create, delete, and manage accounts, read user information, manage group policy links. So these are all common day-to-day sysadmin type jobs that you would have to do that you can say, delegate to members of a particular organizational unit. My help desk is in an OU. They can manage accounts. They can manage our Jira ticketing system. all of these kind of common tasks can be automated. So for instance, I can actually pull this up in here. So if I go into, that's group policy, I want to go into users and computers. I right click on, say, computers. I can delegate control. So here's my little wizard. I can add users or groups. So let's say CSI3670 temp. I think this is a person that I created. Yep, there we go. You can read all the accounts. And then I would have access to those particular tasks. I'm going to cancel it so it doesn't happen because I want that user to be my dumb user who has access to nothing. But there, task delegation. Pretty straightforward. Where are we at? 30 minutes. Okay. Kind of speeding through here, so might end even earlier than expected. We've already applied the group policy object to organizational units. You all did that in the lab. This is more of a review type of thing. But just to kind of make sure we all remember, we have a group policy, and there's just a couple of distinctions. So group policy objects by themselves are stateless. You can create a group policy object in here, for instance. So this is my group policy objects folder in my domain. I can create as many of them as I want, but they're not going to be active until they are linked. Right, so for instance, I click my domain controllers and I see this Vim GPO. This is the thing that is broken, by the way, if anybody knows why it doesn't work. We'll see in a moment. But basically, again, it is linked. So if I right click this, it is link enabled. I also set it to enforced. Again, this was the hierarchical execution of GPOs. We want to make sure that this thing is being executed regardless of what the local policy is. And then we can edit it. And then we have the particular, we all remember this lovely form from your lab 3 or 4 labs ago, I think, where you had to dig down, figure out what's where. All right. So group policy object, make sure that is linked to whatever container you have. You don't see necessarily groups in here, though. So if I create a new group, it's not going to necessarily show up because this is, again, OU based. What you can do, however, is in your group policy object, you can add groups inside of here. So I just clicked a random domain policy again. So this is the default. Right now, the authenticated users group is being applied the default domain policy. All right, so this is a group. Note that I am not applying a group policy object to this group. I am applying the group to the policy. That's why I said it's kind of backwards. But I could add any group that I've created in here. Yeah, just for fun, let's do that. So let's, I closed it already. Yep, closed it already. Need to stop closing things that I need. Look at all these errors about group policy. It's like I was trying to do something. All right, new group. Supergroup. Let's make it global. It's a security group. Here's my supergroup. Neat. Now when I pop over to group policy, I'm going to refresh it. Again, we don't see the group pop up in here under 3670. But what we do see is the ability to add that group inside of the object. So now any user that is in this particular group would have the default policy applied. Again, you'd have to do a GP update / forced if you want to see that happen, but that's how we would take care of that. Does anybody have any questions so far? Not, then we'll continue on. Much better coffee at home than at the school. So the last thing I was going to show you before I kind of sign off and let you all hopefully finalize your term projects um, is, and so this is one of the kind of cool things you can do with group policy is to remotely install software. Let's assume that this quarantine ends. You can all go back to the school. You log into the SCCS computers and you see, let's say it's the first time you've used that one, you might see installing Word, installing Sublime, installing SolidWorks, whatever software is going to be installed by default next term. This can be handled by group policy, which, typically is how it would be handled here. Now, I've got this link, I've got this link, I've got, I think those are the only links. But basically, I've got some ways to winter 2020. I'm gonna guess that the winter 2020 semester is gonna be done for on campus. But basically, there are a lot of articles out there for doing this. Um, and I will say, installing software through group policy is probably one of the most searched terms that I've been able to find in terms of troubleshooting because it's such a pain in the ass. Which is why this is going to lead into I could not get this to work, which I think is hilarious. So if anybody knows what I'm doing wrong here, please feel free to chime in because I know there are some AD experts in the class. But a couple of things here. So let's say that everybody in our department needs Vim. All right, so these are going to be Windows machines, so we will install gvim. I also have a Notepad++ installer as well, just to see if the MSI for Vim was broken. So what we've got is a link to an MSI file. Now, if you're not familiar, which I assume you would be at this point in your career as computer experts, an MSI file is a Windows installer. If you want to install software and all they have is an executable, this will not work. So you need an MSI file so that the MSI exec program can install something. Now, there are ways to convert from exe to MSI, but MSI needs this particular type of installer. So I will say that. But if we go to our installers folder, we see this Notepad++. So straight up installer. We also see the Vim installer. Let's close out of Notepad++. Interesting. Maybe this is the problem. Cancel. All right, go away. Forgot to click finish. All right, so Vim. Maybe this was the issue. I was not getting this little pop-up before. So basically this would be the Vi installer. It's already installed on this machine. Yes, cancel. Finish. Minimize, minimize, minimize. So we see Vim's already installed on here. Notepad++ is not. I have not rebooted this machine yet. I don't think anyway. Yeah. So this is my primary domain controller. I've got the secondary domain controller .26. But let's say that everybody needs the installers in this folder. So what we need to do if we want to get this to work is we have to first create a distribution point. Now, this is basically a shared folder that is accessible on the network by the system account. So the system account is going to be the one that does the installation. Basically, all you're doing is you're creating a shared folder and allowing access to it. And then you're going to put the files that you need in there. All right, so in here, I've done this already. So this is the installers folder. You go into properties, click sharing, and there would be like you'd click this share button and it would create a shared folder. You get your network path. So this would be your UNC path, which you need throughout this process. Tick advanced sharing. Make sure that this is ticked because I'm pretty sure this is not ticked by default. Set your permissions for who has access to the folder. So system has access, everyone has read access, so life should be good. Basically, I can pop over to another machine and see this location. So actually, let's do that now. So this is my secondary domain controller. I can open up Windows Explorer, //Fredericks-DC1, installers. Then we see our programs here. And if we double click, we see that, we would basically go ahead and install this software. Yes, I'm going to cancel because I don't want to run it right now. All right, so our folder is shared. The other thing we have to do, we have shared it on the network. We haven't shared it with Active Directory, though. All right, so if we go back to Active Directory, thank you. You can right click on your domain, new, shared folder. All right, so if I click in here, I've already created this. This shared folder is installers. So if we look at it, we get a slightly different properties window. So what's the UNC path? Who manages it? A little bit more information. Security, you also have to check in here because, again, there could be other permissions more related to Active Directory inside of here. So authenticated users have access, system has access, admins have read access. Okay. What else am I missing here? Pre-Windows commandable. Let's give everybody access. You get access, and you get access, and you get access. Authenticated user system. Now I'm just kind of checking to make sure. I also added in domain computers to make sure that the computers themselves had access. All right, so we've updated that. But basically, we did this in two phases. Create the local shared folder, create the shared folder in Active Directory. All right, so then we're going to create a group policy object to describe who is going to get this deployment package. So is it going to be user-based? Will it be computer-based? We're going to just create a new GPO and apply it to a particular organizational unit. So if I go back in here, go to my group policy, I created this Vim GPO. So what I did is I applied it to my domain controllers OU. Domain controllers are going to be basically my DC1 and DC2. Okay. So if we look at this, I've actually set it up to be in two places. This is more me flailing about trying to figure out how to get this to work. It's ticked for computer installation. So if you go to computer config, policies, software settings, there's a software installation object that you can set. So here I've got Notepad++. It's assigned, and they're pointing to the UNC share. All right, so this path, it's important that you use the share as well, because this path has to be accessible by everywhere. Like if I put C:, user slash like eFredericks or whatever my account name is on here, other machines aren't going to know that path, but they do know the network path. So for instance, if I look at this, basically it is just a link to the particular file, with security settings. Again, everybody should have access to this. Now let's add domain computers in here just in case. If this works during class, I'll be ecstatic, by the way. Enterprise domain controllers, system, creator, owner, I don't know who that is, but sure. Okay. So, and the other thing in here too is there was some options for assigned versus published. So if you assign it, then it will be forced to be installed. If you publish it, then a user could go into like the add remove programs option and then install it manually. But we want everybody to be forced to use this. Now I also set it in user config. So again, policy, software settings, software installation, same things in here. Set to auto install whenever the user would log in. Let's also add that in here just to be on the safe side. So I'm adding domain computers. Oops, spelled it wrong. Computeres. So we have that, full control. I'm giving too much control. to some of these various things when they don't need change access, for instance. But anyway, if I wanted to create a new one, for instance, I would do new package. And this is basically what I did. You would put the UNC path and then click the installer that you want. And then let's say, so let's add Vim. Which option do you want to use? And then it just should blast it out. Okay. So close this, close this. So now in theory, when I reboot the machine, when I do a GP update / force, your policy would be re-downloaded. This install package would be forced out to everybody. And you know, what's my account on here? So I'm gonna try one more thing. Who am I on here? E. Fredericks. Okay. So let's find me. I just want to see something. Actually, no, let's do it for this guy. So I created this dummy user. Let's make him a domain controller. So my user is now in here as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to pop over to the secondary, so my target. I'm going to open up PowerShell as an admin. And then we're going to do an update. So, please. Come on, machine. Let's go. All right, GP update / force. Now, when I run a force, it will tell me that there's a policy setting that can only be run on startup. So I'm adding this / boot flag, which is going to save me from having to type Y and hit enter. So it's going to auto reboot for me. So now I'm going to see this. Basically, it's going to have to be rebooted. Fine. I'm going to get kicked off here. And then I'll reopen the session momentarily. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that. All right, so some other things in here. Basically, I have just kind of a short, kind of like a little list here. So create an OU, drag the computer's objects that you want to apply the object to, or the group policy object to. Create the share in Active Directory. Create and apply your GPO, and then do a force. And then ideally, life is good, things have been installed. Now, I'm gonna give this a second to reboot. See if it's up now. When I say this is one of the more annoying things to do with group policy, there tend to be a lot of mitigating factors when this will or will not work. So I've noticed a lot of points on the internet, various help forums. If you're on a particular type of network, if you're on a particular switch, if your computer's on Wi-Fi versus Ethernet, if it's in a virtual machine environment even, this can be, all confounding factors to why this will or will not work. The common strategy I've seen is to basically increase the amount of time that the GPO has before the user's allowed to log in. Reboot the machine twice. Basically, there's a lot of things out there. Yep, I'm glad somebody caught that. So the common thing is that there's going to be an issue with accessing the MSI. So let's see if logging in as this user in that group policy session has fixed it. Pretty sure it's not going to work, but we'll see. Did not. I should be seeing Notepad++ here. All right. And you're not going to be in here. Although Vim's there. When did Vim get installed? Can't remember if I did this or not. I didn't think I installed Vim over here. Can't remember though. Well, it was definitely in the main one in 21. Created April 5th. Yeah, so definitely not Tuesday. Yeah, I was there. Okay, so what we will see, I'm gonna close this because I don't need it right now. If I go back to my main one here, I actually see a lot of errors and warnings in my manager here. Someone hacked Vim on your VM. Exactly. But I see errors on DC too. So license activation failed. That's interesting. Failed to apply software changes to software and blah, 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 blah. So basically, here's a %1612 error. What this means is that for whatever reason, group policy could not find the network share. Even though I can run it on locally on that machine as my user, I can basically access it over there. Just for some reason, system can't see it. It reminds me, one other thing I can show you here. I didn't need to close it just yet, so temp 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Emacs. Oh, fail. I'm not like triple jointed. I can't do Emacs. Because no one use Sublime anymore. So, I don't know. I like Sublime, but it's not Vim. Even though I think there's a Vim plugin now, right? All right. Does this have... Does not have it. I thought it was on this machine. So you can actually fake a login as the system user using the psexec tool. Is it in here? No, where the heck was this at? Maybe it's in my Google Cloud setup. I could have swore it was in here. Basically, there's that psexec tool we talked about last time that one of you suggested, and you can actually fake logging in as the system user, which you do not have access to. System is the account that's used to install things. What I was seeing was that running that, for whatever reason, that network location was not accessible. So something on my end in terms of the setup made this not work. What I can do though, let's actually reboot my main machine. So I'm going to reboot my primary domain controller. And honestly, logging back on, I will expect that Notepad++ pops up. I know it's not there. I haven't installed it. But yeah, basically for whatever reason, this network path is not accessible, even though everybody and their mother has read, write, change access to it. So what I have seen out there is that this problem is actually fairly common. If you can get around it, that's wonderful. But if for whatever reason your infrastructure isn't allowing it to happen, if you can't figure it out, maybe there's a silly setting that I missed somewhere. Maybe it's even a firewall thing, I don't know. But one of the more common solutions is just to create a batch file that runs locally. So rather than running this as a group policy installation, like a deployment, copy over a batch file, and then just run msi exec file.msi through the batch file. So kind of a cheap way of getting around this problem. Still accessible over the network. We know that normal accounts have access to this, just for whatever reason, the particular system one does not. I didn't create that script to basically just put the msi exec /i and then file path in there. Let me go ahead and pop back open remote desktop here. So we want .21, and we should be able to get in. All right. So now we're waiting for the group policy client, which is a good sign. Hey, look at that. It's installing it locally. So the interesting thing here is that this computer by itself can install it, even though it's pointing at a network path. The other computers cannot. So again, this is something on my end, not necessarily your end. I effectively followed the standard steps for installing a deployment package or setting up a deployment. You know, 50-50, this will or will not work. I'm sure there is some confounding factor on my end causing it to not work, but yeah. So Notepad++ installed today. Date modified 4/7. Today's 4/7. So that did install via group policy. I could have sworn I had this PS exec, but apparently I do not. Let me maybe try and pull this up for you because I know I had this PS exec install as system. Is it this guy? I don't know why I don't even have my search up here anymore. Yeah, so the thing with the system account is that you can't run as system, even though that's what it's being installed as. So there is this PS exec tool, which was mentioned before. And if you guys are trying to remember what it was, the suggestion was to use it to basically remote into other machines through PowerShell, so that you don't have to use that, the remoting basically, which is kind of fraught with problems. But you can also use it to be a local system user. So basically you run it as psexec-s-i command.exe, and then you get a command window, which is the system account in the foreground. So very easy to go ahead and get that set up. So that's basically it for the slides today. So again, next time we'll have a special optional lab. If you do not want to participate in the lab, and it will become clear why you may or may not want to, probably tomorrow night when I send out more details. Thank you. The animation came from somebody on Google. And this is one of those times where I forgot to put the link in the comments. So definitely make sure you get your term projects done. One other thing I should mention too is that if you're a junior, and you're looking at classes for next year, and you liked me, you're not going to be able to find me. I am actually going to be moving universities at the end of the year, so this is the last time any of you will have a lecture from me. I'm going over to Grand Valley, so if you guys want to do a master's at Grand Valley, that's where I will be. Yep, sorry. They pulled me away. But yeah, it was a tough decision, especially since I've been here for 5 years now. But moving over there, and yeah, it should be fun. Go to Grand Valley, do a master's with me. We'll do some cool stuff. It's 10 minutes from Lake Michigan. Hopefully. I've got a lot of friends over there actually from other institutions who've started teaching there and they love it. Nothing wrong with OU, so I should mention that. That's not any problems that I've had here. So, but it's been a pleasure having all of you, and I hope you all do well. But again, we still have a few more classes to get through, but it's going to be all driven by you rather than me, basically. Yeah, you got a question. Can we still keep in? Absolutely. Yeah, so the Discord, what you will notice probably is the icon's going to change to I have plans to make it a Grizzly slash a Laker. But yeah, definitely stay in here. I would love to keep in touch with all of you. Um, I mean, I never like kick anybody out or the accounts don't get automatically pruned or anything. So if you all want to stick around and give the next generation some advice, you're more than welcome to. Um, but yeah. Anyway, the remainder of the time I will be in the voice chats and in the main chats if anybody has any leftover questions, but we have a question. Yeah. You guys can just ask the question. The question bot's down for some reason. Why are you one of the best profs I've Aw, that makes me feel nice inside. Um I don't know. I guess it just worked out. But guess he plays games. Oh, that's just a side benefit that I do that. Um, well, that's not necessarily true. I think Dr. Zitko's higher rated, right? Isn't he like a 5 and I'm a 4.8 or whatever like that? But yeah, no, it's been fun, definitely. So we will keep in touch, I hope. And if you all drop off and go on to bigger and better things, make sure you drop by and say hi every now and again. Aw, so sweet. Thank you. Nice. Well, I appreciate that. Um, Flag the review that gave you a 4.8. Hey, it's whatever everybody feels I deserve. I'm not in it for the ratings, but hopefully it's there to help you all. Anyway, like I said, any questions, I will be around in the chat. I'm probably not going to stream anything after this to make sure that you all focus on your term projects rather than watching me do stuff. But other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you on Thursday. I will send out some instructions on that. Actually, what we have to do too is I also have to do the scheduling for presentations next week. So I will make a note to myself right now to send that out. Send out instructions for scheduling. I will say this too, so if you're still paying attention, if you want to volunteer for a particular day, I will take them on a first come, first serve basis. Send it to me by email, preferred, and otherwise I will send out instructions probably tomorrow. So there's that as well. Anyway, I will end the stream. I hope you all, again, have a good day. Good luck with your term projects, and I'll be around for questions. Bye-bye. Oh, maybe not. Question. Yeah, what's up? How may I be of service? There we go. Do you have to have a project finish on presentation day? So yeah, this is a question that I've answered a couple times already, but I'm more than happy to clarify again. So I want your video is going to have to be ready by your presentation time. Your project doesn't necessarily have to be fully functional. It has to be fully functional by the last day of class. So as long as you present something, I will be happy. Right? If you still have broken functionality, that's okay. Show us where you are at and tell us what you have left to do or what has to be fixed. So again, I kind of have it set up where you don't necessarily have to be done by your presentation date. If you are, that's great. If you still have a couple of things left, just tell us what you have going. And if you have problems, there's something you're just banging your head against the wall on, maybe we can help you during the Q&A session. All right, don't feel embarrassed if something's not quite done. Right? If you do your presentation, you will get the presentation points. If you do not do the presentation, you do not get presentation points. It's that pretty straightforward. So show us what you got. But yeah, the official last day of class is when everything has to be turned in by. And I'll put up submission links for, you know what I'll probably do? I will probably put up submission links for both the presentation and for the final project deliverable, just so that like if you're sending me YouTube links or whatever, you can just put it in that way. Yeah. Anyway, any other questions that you want me to verbally answer? Other than that, now I'm officially signing off. I will be in the chat, so have a good one.